Good morning, everyone. And I'm sorry this video is out late today. I've been working for the last 8 days on a work retreat. And in that work retreat, I've been doing a lot of tasks that require attention. And while I was doing those tasks, I completely forgot about this week's video. So it's been a really fun week, actually. Instead of trying to get things done in between meetings and appointments, just to have a whole 8 days to do nothing but think and be creative and write and just, that opportunity to have a different pace and not be up and at my desk by 8:45 in the morning, which is my normal routine. It's been really, really lovely. I've been spending my mornings on my back patio, sun gazing and drinking my morning coffee, and it's just been lovely. And as I was thinking and contemplating about what I wanted to share with you this week, I just want to be really vulnerable and share with you some processes that I've been experiencing that's coming up for love and attention is deep feelings of guilt and regret. We all have, well, I don't know if we all have, but a lot of people have things that they regret, choices that they regret. And they come back to that regret can come back to you over a period of time, not to bite you in the ass, but it's a part of the grieving process. So this process of self-forgiveness, I don't think we talk about self-forgiveness from a place of grief. At least I don't know that I've really heard anybody talk about it recently. What I realized for myself is that in the regret and that there was not properly processed grief because of the guilt and shame. And I remember maybe a year after my divorce from my children's father, pardon me, I was really experiencing a lot of guilt and shame and regret and fear that I had, been a horrible person, which, I certainly made choices that if I could be who I am now and gone back and lived then as me now, there are choices I wouldn't have made. And I don't say that lightly. It's just the truth. Like I couldn't be who I am today back then, right? And neither could you. You can't, none of us can go back to those points in our life where we regret our choices and go back with the learning that we have now because of those choices. So as I was looking at this and talking to a dear friend and very, very wise friend of mine, he said, there's a difference between it's important to have healthy regret, but at some point it becomes your spiritualized ego just beating the shit out of you. And so I realized that through the years, I've been processing that at different levels. And so, yes, the spiritualized ego had come back to me at some point this week and was beating the shit out of me. And I had forgotten that, I am still grieving. There are parts of the loss of that life that, I'll probably have some grief about, who knows, for the rest of my life. When we suffer a major loss, we grieve in waves, and that's the way it is. And when we can accept that that's the way it is, that grief comes in waves, unless we can be a spiritual master and we have time to sit with it, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week for it to process, it's going to come in waves. For those of you that study the work of Dr. David R. Hawkins, he once said at a lecture that he had lost somebody very important to him, and he didn't say who it was, but after reading some information about him, I'm pretty sure it was probably his stepdaughter that he lost when she was younger. He said that he sat with grief for 11 days and he gave his attention to nothing else. And he was able to just sit and be with it and be deeply with grief for 11 days. And after that, he never experienced grief again, which to me is pretty amazing. I know people that have lost children that have sat with grief for months and years and are still experiencing grief. So I don't know what it was for him that caused him to not experience that deep level of grief anymore. But I'm pretty sure it's probably acceptance. And perhaps also that he didn't have a lot of regret that he was hanging on to. So it's this concept of healthy regret and unhealthy regret, how it affects our grief, how it affects our ability to love and forgive ourselves, I think is really, really important. Grief over loss is natural. It would be inhuman, I think, to not feel grief over a loss. But the intensity of our grief can be exacerbated by guilt and shame. Now, I'm not saying that all grief that lasts for an extended or prolonged period of time is because of guilt and shame. But I have worked with people, and I know within myself that my own guilt and shame that I've had to come to a place of self-forgiveness with has definitely prolonged the unhealthy, self-deprecating, self-punishing aspects that can arise within the grief. So as I was being with all of this week, and I had this situation come up in my mind, of course, not in my lived experience, but in my mind, I realized that if I didn't get a hold of this, it was really going to take me down into a deep hole. And I really didn't want to go there, but I wanted to be honest with what I was experiencing. And I wanted to respect the loss that I had experienced and that I contributed to for the family in the divorce process. Because as we know, divorce is never one person's fault. So as I was being with all of this, I realized that in the process of being with myself, I had to literally just make a choice. I'm either going to choose to take what I learned from that experience and integrate that learning into my daily life, or I'm going to beat myself up and punish myself and live in a state of spiritualized ego, deflated spiritual ego, and then denigrate everything else that's important to me, like life itself. So even though you have the knowledge of that, the choice of it wasn't easy. So the focus that eventually worked for me to care for that part of me that felt the need to stay in a state of guilt and shame to make up for perhaps my part in that time of my life. I was able to see that as a point of insanity. That state where you feel so guilty and shameful that you're in, that it puts you into that state of deep regret and shame, is basically insanity. So I had the choice to choose insanity or to choose compassion for the one in me that thought the things that I thought, that did not have the capacity to be any different at the time, and to really have a deep, heartfelt compassion for that one, and to be really grateful that somewhere I had the capacity to be willing to accept my part, to become really aware of what my part was, and that I have the willingness to begin to make those changes. And which has brought me to my life right now, which is one of peace and enjoyment and fulfillment and gratitude, and just a deep capacity for love and compassion for the hard road that we all have to walk to coming to a place of higher states of love and effectiveness and beauty on this planet. It's a hard road. If you're really loving and compassionate, and you can sit with some of the most difficult aspects of humanity and find compassion for that and for people that are going through it, you've walked a hard road to get there. And that deserves a lot of respect. So in this place, I was able to find my respect again, and my respect for myself, because I had the capacity to not go into a state of insanity. So as you're facing your own regret, to stay healthy in your regret, be sure that you ask yourself, what have I learned because of this poor choice, because of that poor choice? What have I learned? And do I feel like I've integrated that into my choice-making process? And if the answer to those questions are yes, then it's time to move forward with compassion for yourself, even if you still feel grief for the loss. So recognizing that you can feel grief for the loss without the insanity of continuing to beat yourself up and denigrate and even potentially self-harm. It's a very powerful place to be when you realize that you can be in grief without self-flagellation. I hope this teaching was helpful for you. And I hope that if you are processing regret or guilt or shame or grief, that you can find a way to do it with the utmost of kindness and compassion for the you that made those mistakes. And I say mistakes out of habit, but it's really mistaken behavior. It's not misbehavior or, that you are bad. Just in closing, I want to talk about the work of Dr. Dan Gartrell on this teaching of mistaken behavior. Dr. Gartrell is a early childhood teacher at Bemidji State University. If he's still there, maybe he's retired. And he also writes textbooks for early childhood educators. And in that, in one of his books called The Power of Guidance, he talks about the 3 different levels of mistaken behavior in children, which is so easily applied to your own inner child as an adult. And so the basic premise of his teaching is that children don't intentionally misbehave. They have problems they don't know how to solve. And there are 3 levels of those problems, from basic exploring and experimenting your environment to having strong unmet needs that they're trying to get met. And so as an adult, we can look at the inner child or inner teenager, perhaps, that made the choices that we are now regretting. We can understand that that was a younger aspect of our psyche, of our mind, trying to solve a problem that we didn't know how to do any differently. And now, because of the consequences that may be causing you guilt or shame or regret or grief, you now have learned. And so to go back and to harm yourself or to stay in a state of unhealthy mental condition because you were somebody different just doesn't even make sense. So I hope you find compassion for yourself in your guilt and your shame. And please don't stay there by yourself. Please reach out to a professional that can help you process it, because these are not places that we want to stay in alone within ourselves. All right, beautiful people. I love you so much, and I wish you love and compassion and mercy and grace.